Formed in 1337, the Royal Militia of the island of Jersey can claim to be the oldest subunit of the British Army, although, because it is not a regiment, and was disbanded for decades in the late 20th century, it is not the most senior. History. A militia force was organized in accordance with the order on the 24th of July 1203 of King John to provide a sufficiency of men and money to defend the island from the enemy. In 1214 Eustace the monk, a pirate based in Sark, arrived under orders from the King of France to harry the Channel Islands. In Guernsey, Eustace met a newly raised and locally armed defence force comprising the whole manhood of the island. This could be considered to be militia. Jersey would almost certainly have made the same preparations. In 1336, the exiled King David II of Scotland, from his base in France, raided the island of Jersey. The following year, in response to the threat of a repeat of this incursion, King Edward III ordered Thomas de Ferrers, Warden of the Isles, to levy and equip a militia of all men capable of bearing arms, and to form them into companies of thousands, hundreds and twenties, and to lead them well armed and arrayed for the defense of the islands. This created and organized, compulsory and unpaid, island militia. Jersey was invaded by French troops in 1461. They were supporters of the Lancastrian force during the War of the Roses, as was the governor of Montorgueil, who had surrendered the castle to the French. The militia was not strong enough to retake the castle and instead controlled half of the island with the base in Gronez Castle, where they stayed until 1468, when the invaders were expelled by a Yorkist English army led by Richard Harleston, supported by the militia commanded by the Seigneur of St. Wendon after a siege of Montorgueil that lasted 19 weeks. The help given by the St. Wen militia earned them the honor to parade on the right flank of future militia parades. In 1545, the Jersey militia consisted of 12 parochial bands, many of which were called into action in 1549 when a force of French pirates, who had captured Sark as a base for their activities, landed at Bowley Bay. Advancing inland, they met the militia, who defeated them and driving them back down to the beach, killing up to 1,000 in pursuit. In 1555, parish companies were ordered to practice every Sunday, weather permitting, firing arquebus, bow and arrow and crossbow. 17th century. A review undertaken in 1617 showed over 3,000 men, although their arms were defective, with only 12 pikes between them, few muskets, and many being armed with just staves. In 1622 they were organized into 3 regiments, the North, West and East. The use of the title colonel for the officer in charge of a regiment appears around 1620. Prior to this, the commander was called a captain. During the English Civil War, the majority of people in the island opted to support the king. The parliamentary supporters, being imprisoned, are forced to leave the island and having the property confiscated. There was little for the militia to do. In 1646, the future Charles II visited the island, and when he returned in 1649, following the execution of his father in London, a ceremony was held in the Royal Square in St. Helier on the 17th of February 1649, where Charles was publicly proclaimed king. In October 1651, Cromwell sent a fleet of over 80 ships and military force to capture the island. The parliamentary ships delayed landing for several days, moving from bay to bay, being followed by the 2,000 militia, until after 3 nights they started landing at St. Wen's Bay. Opposed by a troop of militia cavalry, the invaders suffered casualties, but the militia infantry were dispersed and tired after 3 days of marching and could not reinforce the landing point faster than the parliamentarian troops were being landed from the ships. Outnumbered, the militia fell back 340, retiring into Elizabeth Castle, where they had provisions for 8 months. Others to Montorgueil, which was besieged first, and following negotiations surrendered, with 40 Royalists supporters, who wanted to continue the fight, being allowed to go to Elizabeth Castle, which was then put under siege, and after a week, a lucky shot hit a powder store which exploded, killing 6 and burying 40 under rubble. Charles wrote to the garrison to give them permission to surrender, although they held out until the 12th of December when, following negotiations, the defenders were permitted to travel to France with the money and possessions, and the castle surrendered. The militia was reorganized and uniformed in scarlet by the governor of Jersey, Sir Thomas Morgan, in 1678, and in 1685 a troop of horse was raised. 18th century. Around 1730, the militia was divided into 5 regiments, based on the parishes of the island, the 4th Regiment consisting of 2 battalions. Compulsory military service was introduced in 1771, and the militia was increased to a regiment of cavalry, a regiment of artillery, and 5 regiments of infantry. On the 1st of May 1779, a Franco-Dutch force attempted a landing at St. Owen's Bay. Early that morning, lookouts sighted 5 large vessels and a great number of boats some 3 leagues off the coast, proceeding towards the coast in order by coup de main to effect a landing. Guns on the cutters and small craft supporting the landing fired grape shot at the defenders on the coast. The defenders, the 78th Regiment of Foot and the Jersey Militia, together with some field artillery force, marched to St. Owen's Bay, the proposed landing beach. The artillery was dragged through the sand of the beaches, arriving in time to oppose the landing. The defenders were able to prevent the landing, suffering only a few men wounded when a cannon burst. The enemy fleet moved to St. Brelade's Bay, only to see more defenders ready for them. The proposed invasion was abandoned. The invasion was attempted again, but the protecting fleet was intercepted and nearly annihilated. A third attempt managed to get most men ashore undetected on the night of the 5th of January 1781. Several ships were wrecked, losing around 200 men. Marching to St. Helier, the French arrived before dawn, taking the governor prisoner. Messages were sent to alert the island regiments and the militia who mustered outside the town. The militia, displaying enthusiastic loyalty, fought alongside regiments of the regular British Army at the Battle of Jersey, when together they defeated an attempted French invasion. 50 regulars and 30 militia were casualties. Very few of the French force escaped. On the 28th of May 1778, the governor of Jersey, Field Marshal Henry Seymour Conway, submitted plans to Lord Weymouth for the construction of 30 coastal towers to forestall, or at least impede, French incursions on the island. King George III granted approval and funding on the 5th of July 1778. To be manned by the militia and known as Conway's Towers. 23 were eventually built. Discontent amongst Methodist militia troopers during the 1780s and 1790s about having to parade on a Sunday was eventually listened to, with the Privy Council agreeing to allow Methodists to drill on weekdays. 19th century. 3 Martello Towers were built. 1808 Portlet, 1811 ICHO. La Tour de Vind was completed in 1814. They were built to aid defense of possible landing places. In 1831, the militia was designated the Royal Jersey Militia on the 50th anniversary of this battle. The facings on uniforms were changed from buff to blue. In 1837 there were 5 regiments, formed into 6 battalions, each with a company of artillery. Every resident from 19 to 65 bears arms, with 16 to 18-year-olds being trained weekly. The whole militia is unpaid. The regiments were reorganized on several occasions between 1870, when the Troop of Dragoons was disbanded, and the end of the century. 4 more Martello Towers were built: 1835 Lewis, 1834 Kempt, 1837 Victoria and Lane, Colette, to improve island defences. In 1844 arsenals were built in each parish, which enabled the artillery to be relocated from the parish churches. In 1881, under General Order No. 130, the 1st, 2nd and 3rd Regiments were permitted the honour of Jersey. 1781, a minor mutiny occurred in 1891 at a parade when men in the West Regiment objected to where they were to stand, calling out Nabuogipa. A small number of the ringleaders were found guilty, spent a few days in the prison and were then treated to a meal out in the town by the comrades. 20th century. In 1905 the militia came under the Army Act and was reorganized to create a regiment of artillery comprising 2 field and 2 garrison companies, an engineer company, a medical company and 3 battalions of infantry. In 1915, 1 company was detached to the 7th Battalion, the Royal Irish Rifles. The militia remained in Jersey throughout the war, although many of the men went to serve in British regiments. 6,292 Jerseymen serving in total, with 862 being killed. In 1917, the 7th Battalion was disbanded and its personnel transferred to 2nd Battalion, the Hampshire Regiment. Other members of the regiment served as guards at the Blanchers Banks prisoner of war camp located at St. Brelade. The militia was reconstituted in 1921 as 1 infantry battalion, the Royal Militia of the island of Jersey. In World War II, the island was demilitarized. 11 officers and 193 men of the militia left on the SS Hodder to England, where they formed the nucleus of the 11th Battalion, the Hampshire Regiment. It was a training battalion, based in the United Kingdom throughout the war until it was disbanded in 1946. Because the National Service Act did not apply in the Channel Islands, the Royal Militia of the island of Jersey went into suspended animation until it was formally disbanded, along with the other British militia regiments, in 1953. Modern. In 1987, it was reformed as a Territorial Army Regiment, the Jersey Field Squadron, 111th Regiment, Royal Engineers, later 73rd Regiment, Royal Engineers. In 2007, it came under the operational command of the Royal Monmouthshire Royal Engineers. Battle Honours. The regiment was awarded the following battle honours: Jersey 1781, the Great War 1914 to 1918. Both these honours are unique to the regiment.